You have 15 minutes to present. After your presentation, you'll have a seat and you'll receive questions from the commission. You can start now.
Good afternoon. Now I have the pleasure to present what has been my research study during this semester. And it's called Peer Correction and its influence on students' desire to communicate in the English class. To begin with, I was immersed in a school in Renca, called Colegio Jorge Alessandro Rodriguez, and I got assigned to a grade with an amount of students of 43 students. At first, in the first class, I wasn't sure about what to focus on because I thought that the class was almost perfect. There was an interaction between the teacher and the students, but in the second class, at the end, I noticed that one student was the only one who raised his hand and participated in the entire class. And I noticed that because there were two students here talking, and one said that he would like to be as good as the other student. So that called my attention and focused on that student. And made me create this research question, which is, does the correction from an English-speaking student affect other students' willingness to communicate within the EFL class context? We need to consider that willingness to communicate, according to Brown, means that the students demonstrate the intention and predisposition to initiate communication in the L2 when students are given the opportunity to do so. Okay. The purpose of this study is to examine if the variable that this student corrects the other classmates affects their willingness to communicate. And I elaborated an hypothesis, and this is if the initial number of students that participated at the beginning of one class versus the number of students that participated after being corrected or interrupted by this English-speaking student will be significantly lower in terms of statistics. The objectives, in order to fulfill that hypothesis, are to determine the effect of peer correction over the students' willingness to communicate. And I elaborated three specific objectives, which are to determine the initial number of students who participate in class. Then I made a test situation in order to provide numbers to answer this question, and is to assess the student's desire to communicate in English through an intervention. And then I got the final number to compare with the first one, which is to determine the final number of students who participate in class. It's shaking. Okay. The data collection materials. To fulfill the previous objectives that I mentioned, I decided to use checklists because I thought that they were a way to get unbiased results because they are based on numbers. According to Mackey and Gass, they said that different types of observation can be identified depending on their degree of structure. In highly structured observation, the researcher often utilizes a detailed checklist or rating scale. This observation can facilitate the recording of details such as when, where, and how often certain types of phenomena occur. To compare these results between the first and the second class, I performed an intervention, a class, which, as Park said, the researcher applies a test condition to the subjects or objects of the research and then attempts to determine the effects of its condition. There's something missing. I have something else to show. Okay. In trustworthiness, I had to make some adjustments during the term because at the beginning, the focus of my study was positivism, but I wasn't sure what does that mean. So the first materials I made were focused on the students' opinions and feelings, but they were not coherent to the research question. So I received feedback from professors and some classmates, and that helped me to choose the checklist and the intervention. And these materials allow me to collect unbiased and objective data, which are the objectives, the results that I was looking for. And I consider that these materials are useful to collect data in different scenarios, not just peer correction. Different scenarios, I mean, to test the studying students' willingness to communicate, but affected by different elements or variables. The application of data of these materials. In the first class, I observed a regular class in terms of my tutor teacher. I didn't interrupt, I didn't participate much in that class. I just observed how that class works. And this is the checklist I use to test that theory. I made some situations such as students who voluntarily raise their hand to answer teacher's questions. And I mark across according to the students that participated during the class. I also performed, in the second class, I performed the intervention. And at the beginning, I set some rules. These are the rules: that every student has 2 chances to speak in the class. They have to respect each other, raise their hand if they want to talk, wait their turn in silence, and they can only speak in English. Of course, these questions were made by asking them what they thought they would be good in that class. Because at first I said that in that class we're going to talk a lot. And I asked them, okay, what do you think that should be needed to perform that class? And this is what they said. And in the class, I projected some images of Pokemons. They were not animals, they were Pokemons. And I divided the class in 4 groups. As it was divided in 4 rows, each row was a team. And 1 student per each team, at a time, came to the front, and he would now see the image that was projected. And the other students gave him clues in order to guess what animal or Pokemon he was. And simultaneously with that class, my tutor teacher helped me to collect the data, and she uses the same checklist as the first one in order to compare them. To analyze the data collected, I organize them into different categories because some of them are very similar to each other but not the same. Some are focused on the students that denied to participate or who do not participate, such as here. And I compare them at the initial level and the final level. I contrast them. The categories that I use were voluntary participation, required participation, denial to participate, interruption, and the students who do not participate. And the results I got were that the peer correction towards willingness to communicate were not actually correlated, because the results show that between the first and the second class, they had an increase of just 10%, which is not statistically significant. And one limitation that I had to carry out this study was the little time available, because during this term, the second semester, students from that school took the SIMSE exam. So they were I guess I have 5 classes in which I could not see these students. So I could just perform one intervention to test the correlation between these 2 variables. Okay, the metacognitive analysis. The learning objective I got was regarding the listening language skill. And I decided this learning objective, which is that by the end of the lesson, students will reproduce and repeat rhymes found in a story, focusing attention on the minimal percent. To do so, I will use a story called Is Your Mama Llama, which is about a deer who is lost in the forest and he wants to find his mom. And he asks some animals to know if they're his mom. And the contents of this story are focused on animals and their body parts. And also past and present simple, because this deer was asking questions in order to know what his mama was. And the structure of questions in the past and the present simple. The strengths of this learning objective, as Jules said, is that such pairs have traditionally been used in the teaching and testing of English as second or foreign language to help a student to develop the ability to understand the contrast in meaning based on the minimal sound contrast. So this would help the students not just to recognize and listen the similarities of their sounds, and also to produce them orally. So this will help them to develop their English skills as a whole. Vygotsky also said that the children's learning process occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. The tutor may model behaviors and or provide verbal instructions for the child. So this class will be obviously modeled by the teacher. The weaknesses would be that there will always be misbehaving students. So this could affect the progress of the class. And also another weakness is that it could be difficult sometimes to set some consequences for the misbehavior, because some students are used to that and they're not into change. They're not thinking about change. Rebecca Albert declares in her article called 10 Tips for Classroom Management that while teaching you should be demonstrating compassion, caring, patience, and self-control every chance you get. The students are on us all times, even when we think they're immersed in the task at hand. They watch, they listen, they learn, and they repeat the behaviors they see. So this is, as I said before, modeled by the teacher. The challenges will be to get rid of these misbehavior attitudes. To do so, Vygotsky said that this occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. So by the tutor's model, he will, in a way, calm that behavior and maybe transform the misbehaving students to be more willing to participate in the class. And these are the reference I use.